Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning! Welcome to another edition of Know Your Unit Reborn! This might actually be the final episode after the last three final episodes in which I ended up forgetting a class, and it turns out I didn't. So in this particular case, we are talking about the Gremlin. So the final variant of the familiar, which I swear I've recorded a video for. I had a thumbnail for it laying around. Wasn't very good, I'm redoing that, but still, like, it's weird that I went through all that and then apparently just sort of deleted the episode. But anyway, let's go ahead and discuss the Gremlin. So this is going to be the hardest of the familiars to get, simply because of the requirements. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, I've seen familiars around, why would this one be a problem? See, the thing is, they're classed as a demon, which means that just like orcs, you specifically need a lich in order to recruit them. And the only way that you're getting a lich is, well, you gotta get one from somewhere, don't you? You gotta get one from Chapter 4. Now, you can get them in Pirate's Graveyard if you get all the way through there. You can get some in Palace of the Dead, or if you happen to either get lucky in Palace of the Dead or go into the post-game, then you can get yourself a Ring of the Dead to go transform somebody into a lich, like, for example, Denim, if you want all those skills on him. But as far as the Gremlin goes, it's by far the hardest of the bunch to get. Even Pumpkinheads, you can usually recruit a few floors into Palace of the Dead with Recruit Golem. Or not Recruit Golem, but Control Golem. So, what is it that makes these guys so incredibly insane to get a hold of? It's just kind of arbitrary. They're not necessarily better or worse than any of the other familiars. It's just kind of like orcs. It's just a different flavor of the same thing. But what we're seeing here is kind of the true neutral of the familiar kind of class there, where we've got the fairy with their ridiculous mind control powers and time resets and stuff like that. They're the chaotic evil of the bunch. We've got the pumpkinheads with all their restoring abilities and exploding abilities and their ability to unionize, truly the lawful good of the bunch. And then we've got the guy that's just trying to survive in the wild, just kind of doing their own thing, and that's the Gremlin. They've got moves that honestly make more sense for a wild animal rather than a soldier, but hey, whatever, they're in your army now. So let's go ahead and take a look at these. Now, their skill loadouts are going to be very similar to a lot of the other ones, and we'll go back and do the usual stuff that we typically start off with in a moment. But there's one particular point that I wanted to start off with here, and that's going to be their 4 special moves. See, the thing is, one of those comments that I got yelled at during the Terror Night episode and during early streams of Reborn and stuff like that was like, you gotta use a gonal scream, look, back in the day you could choose when you use your Lament of the Dead and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, cool, all well and good. You can choose when you use it. The thing is, unlike Lament of the Dead, it's not a locked percentage, which means that this thing is effectively going off of either, I think it's like it checks on mind, considering how pretty much 50-50 across the board it is, which means that this can potentially very suddenly drop off on you. Like in this particular case, we could improve it through Spell Strike. That's the benefit of something like this, but then at the same time, that's potentially going way lower. So, like, it depends on where you are in the game, what you're fighting. Like, stuff like Palace of the Dead, it's going to be very difficult to scare that with a Gonal Scream. If you get something like Spell Strike, you might be able to take locked 30 percentages in those cases. In this particular case, against just rando enemies kind of in the above world here, we probably could get this up to about 90% if we were to use some Spell Strike powder as an early setup. And essentially for just a fear move like this, that's not bad. That's okay. That's like strictly in okay territory. It's kind of like how the Angel Knights have their charm move. It's strictly in that sort of like dance move type of category where it's okay if you've got Spell Strike. Then you've got stuff like Coquettish Kiss here, which is completely in the opposite direction. Now, this is a move that right out of the box hits pretty darn hard, and this is even discounting cases where they have a huge advantage. It's got a nice kind of initial punch to it that will be very effective at hurting a lot of things. And essentially what it does is that it essentially damages the thing, and it has a chance to poison. So it's very good at just suddenly ambushing something and going away. It's fairly cheap, and it's fairly strong. Once again, we hit another interesting roadblock here, because, as you saw right here, like right off the rip here, these are units that are basically just randos. These are just random stuff that you would usually steamroll around this portion of the game, right? And even as we see in this case, there's a pretty decent chance that this is going to miss. So once you start getting into those late game areas, those post game areas, stuff like that, this thing's odds to hit just bottom right the hell out, which is surprisingly, why they're one of the few classes that actually wants to carry around a Mercurial file. That move is genuinely really good. Like, if there's nothing that can exercise a zombie gremlin, and they just keep coming back and hitting stuff with Coquettish Kiss, going for, like, let's say, a short bow and a dagger combo, that's a very, very kind of dubious way to spread around poison, hurt a lot of things very, very quickly. It's one of those things that I found really useful in Palace of the Dead. So really useful in that particular context, but again requires a little bit of setup. Then we've got Lingering Kiss, which is going to absorb health and reset recovery time. And again, this isn't bad. As far as power goes, you're probably starting off in roughly like the 20% range and scaling it up from there. It's not bad. It's got potential if you find the right things, if you can make it crit or whatever else. It's got the potential to be a very very strong move here. But it's specifically the recovery time reset that's kind of an interesting bit of backpedal in this case. Now, for a bit of context, for those that played the PSP version or that played the One Vision overhaul, in both of those versions, recovery time resets are insanely powerful. In Reborn, though, why are they not as insanely powerful? Because recovery times don't necessarily go as high. Because so many things got put as things in the automatic category, this means that when something's recovery time is reset to its maximum, it's not necessarily going to make as big of a deal. You don't necessarily notice it as much in many situations. So it might seem like a unit slowed down a little bit, but it won't feel like it's this gigantic, massive thing that completely threw them out of the turn order, you know? So, like, the difference between somebody's potential recovery time versus the amount that they actually used is much smaller. So generally, units are faster across the board in Reborn. So usually it's the healing factor that matters a lot with this particular move, which means that if, again, you find the right cards for it, it can be a great way to, let's say, keep a zombie version of a gremlin running, and that's all well and good. And then the last one of the bunch is going to be the fairly accurate, and yes, I know, I am seeing those same odds that you are, the comparatively fairly accurate Selfless Kiss. You can, again, run a Spell Strike powder in order to improve these odds a bit. This is going to be Stun, Silence, Petrify, all running with those same odds to go and hit something. And this is exactly fine. I personally don't like this move very much because it requires you to just kind of get close, risk potentially doing nothing, and it takes a little bit of setup, so it's a little dicey. But the main thing that I wanted to get across with all of these moves, especially when it comes to stuff like a Gonal Scream, is that every single one of them is classed as a special move. Now, this doesn't always mean the same thing. Like, there's certain versions that are considered special that the fairy can use that don't reset your turn, that don't end your turn, but I specifically want to mention that every single one of those does end your turn. So what this translates to is that they're not going to be something that you're going to be able to kind of spam on top of a regular attack. So, like, if we take a look at that Agonal Scream, one of the main benefits of something like Lament of the Dead is the follow-up, that you can essentially get Lament of the Dead and then immediately act upon that. Or, let's say, something like a Dragon Scale, you can Dragon Scale and then immediately act on that. Just any move that allows you to break down and then attack. So all of their moves do not have their benefits. So if they are running, going for that fear angle on the whole thing, they're essentially going to be serving a support role, more or less. Now, that being said, their weapon loadout is kind of an interesting one, and it's always been pretty interesting. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of a peek here. So, as far as items go, before we get too carried away from that whole thing, I would say something like a Mercurial File as well as a Spell Strike Powder is just something you always want to have on them. I haven't done one of these in a minute. I can never find my dang Black Lizard Powder. So I would say something like this is pretty much just the convenient standard for if you are running, let's say, something like Coquettish Kiss or whatnot. They gain a lot of benefits from both of these two items right here, so just remember that they are affected by them. As far as their spell access, which, I mean, I guess we might as well cover it right now. You've got access to missiles, you've got access to instills, if you need to shield yourself, if you need to do additional damage. Honestly, just shield yourself with the instills in this case. So, like, we would go for, let's say, an air instill in this case. This is going to be fine enough. As far as their missiles go, they're okay. Like, they're strictly going to be in the okay box. They get everything from tiers 1 to 4. And additionally, we've got access to most basic debuffs as well as spell charge over here in the debuff category. No paradigm shift, no torpor, no petroburst. Though realistically, with something like petroburst, you already have a variant of this. With your paradigm shifts and torpors, you kind of have your own flavors of this. But one thing that would have been cool to see a bit more of is something like a Drain Mind or Drain Heart due to their, speed and relatively speedy recovery, but oh well. Anyway, so as far as their debuffs go, they have access to those, and then as far as divine stuff goes, they have access to BOS as well as all basic heals and all divine missiles. Though, like with many of the familiars, they don't really have a whole lot to do with that kind of divine and dark missile category, considering that they can't specialize in those. Anyway, now let's go ahead and continue on. So as far as spellbooks, blowguns, all that kind of thing. Also, hang on, let me double check one thing. I mean, technically they can become warrior. Warrior can go dark, so I guess actually no. Let's take that back because it might be possible to go dark familiar. So yeah, it might be possible to go dark familiar, and it might be worthwhile, especially with something like Coquettish Kiss, which is also scaling up with dark and is just really darn strong. So maybe that's that's a solid maybe. We'll go ahead and compare the results in just a bit of a moment. Do I actually have? Let's see. I don't have any Dark Charms, but that might be worth looking into. Actually, one more thing that's also additionally worth mentioning is that, like all the other familiar variants, you can Ogre Blade into them, and additionally, you still have access to the Stinky set. So, if you wanted a really, really devastating use case for all of those abilities that they had, there you go. Because all those mental stats are going to affect them pretty darn decently. Now, this is when it gets a little bit weird, where they always kind of go into the sort of secondary action box in my particular brain when it comes to their finishers. Because they've got such great coverage when it comes to their finishers in terms of like spellbooks and blowguns. It's so darn cool. And then it's completely in the pick your poison box. I know somebody's already probably written out an angry comment. Like, dumbass, you gotta put your spellbook in your main hand. Yeah, I know. Because that's the pick your poison part of this whole thing. This coverage is beautiful. You've got your ice over here, you got your lightning over here, you got your divine over here, you got some dark, you got your leaden over here from Raging Pummel, you got your poison over here from Venom Sting, you got Eviscerate if you want to be disappointed, and then you've got Disembrain, one of the 2 earth finishers in the game. And this is great until you take a quick look at it and it's like, okay, so my options are, do I want the better vitality and strength from this blowgun right now, or do I want to take a penalty to strength and get plus 3 range over here from the spellbook? They're one of the very few that can actually justify running a spellbook build, and still they're kind of having a bit of a rough time. Now, that being said, there's one thing that I gotta test a little bit further, but I think they potentially might have fixed the thing with certain items not giving you offensive magic stuff, because the Grand Grimoire is suddenly doing that, and I don't remember it doing that last patch. So I need to test that further. Don't take that with a grain of salt. I'll do a follow-up video if it does look like they actually fixed it, but I think potentially that whole intelligence bonus off of your equipment thing might maybe be fixed, kind of. Okay, anyway, so in their particular case, something like the Grand Grimoire, though, is actually perfectly justifiable, seeing as you're going to be hitting pretty decently hard. You can run a couple of your abilities here at the same time. You got some pretty great finishers over here, and additionally, it's going to be, it's at least going to have some bonuses to it. The combination of their low physical stats on top of the just generally low benefits that they get from their weapons means that these finishers, while great on coverage, unless you got like a physical and a crit card, they're not going to be too nuts, comparatively speaking. If you do get a physical and a crit, yeah, no, that's still going to one-shot stuff just fine. It's just, comparatively speaking, it definitely has a bit of a harder time in the initial phases. So you might potentially find yourself specifically relying on one thing or another during a fight. They're a little bit tricky to use, is the thing. So there's that. Anyway, so yeah, we're kind of all over the place here. Sorry about that. It is what it is and all of that sort of thing. Now, you would hope that with something like this, that maybe their avoidance would be high enough to be able to run a full avoidance build. Not really. They seemingly can't dodge worth anything, which I guess they're like a fairy, but extremely jacked, so I guess it is what it is. They at least look that way in their portrait here. Now let's see, anything else that we necessarily want to cover? I feel like when it comes to things like spell books and whatnot, they are one of the few that can justify running something like this. Again, just due to their loadouts here. You run up, you pop out an Agonal Scream. Hopefully, it keeps you relatively safe. You maybe avoid counters with something like an Instill, and then potentially something like a Coquettish to hurt something pretty decently well. Go in for a finish with one of these books, something like a Raging Pummel possibly for taking out birds. And it's interesting in terms of theoretical possibilities for a challenge run or something. But man, it's just hard to even want to do all of that when you can just put on a staff for that extra range and just kind of go to the races from there. So either way, like it's interesting in that regard. So I would say I would say in general, like it's really one of these ones that you can. That's really just going to be entirely up to you. Personally, the way that I prefer to run them is just going to be something like a short bow and dagger, as with the other familiars, just because that counter poison is really darn useful. They don't get as much finisher coverage, but that poison is going to be doing much more than they're doing with their finishers anyway. Overwhelm in general has a tendency to be very, very powerful. Their special kiss moves tend to be fairly cheap, so if they are taking counterattacks, they're building up that MP, they're putting out that poison, they're putting stuff within kill range to be able to finish them off with something like Overwhelm. Their missiles are exactly okay, but you can potentially, let's say, give them a decent, mid-range to cheap missile, like probably just a Volcan Lance 2 in this case. Just a nice little cheap pew-pew move when they don't have anything else, so they need to hit something from far away. We got the Dragon Fang for counters, as you do, but we also get the free poison cast on there, which means if they want to, let's say, use their high mind and potentially save an action, then they might get some benefit out of that. If they set themselves up with some accuracy juice over here, I mean, I don't know if they're just drinking a thermometer or what. I don't know what a mercurial file is specifically. That stuff's supposed to be poison. Why does that make you more accurate? Not to mention, I thought people drank that to get rid of STDs. Is inaccuracy an STD? Is coquettish? You know what? You know what? Maybe I don't want to know. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue on. Like Coquettish Kiss, really darn solid move. Again, that chance to poison, that countering poison in this particular case, that's how I personally ended up running them. Their fear move is good. I personally don't think it's nearly as good as Lament of the Dead, just because it's free, it doesn't cost anything, it's coming out every turn, and you can just simply, like, if you wanted to figure out how to target your Lament of the Dead, just move forward and don't take an action, and you will already more than likely outspeed the other thing in front of you, so there you go. You've already targeted your Lament of the Dead. So, anyways, that's more or less about that. I'd be curious to see what you guys think. It's weird how late in the game you get these guys, but unlike the orcs, there's at least an interesting reason to use them, you know? So Coquettish Kiss is interesting. Agonal Scream is interesting. The other moves are just kind of okay. Especially considering you kind of want your Black Lizard Powder in order to even get any use of your Stun, Silence, Petrify move, you know? And even then, a lot of times it's just easier to do things other ways. But they can potentially at least be reasonably defensive, getting proper armor instead of just running robes. You can run Stinky Set on them if you want to just go spam a Gonal Scream all day, so there's that option as well. There's a lot of fun options you could do with kind of skill choices with that Stinky Set anyways. Oh, actually, there is one more thing that I wanted to mention here. Sorry that I keep clapping in the microphone. I clap. It's just what I do. But the Dragon Slayer set. So this is a weird one that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but you can make a Dragon Slayer book build if you want. Now, granted, in that particular case, you definitely want to be running a book. Unfortunately, Biblion Draconis does not actually count as a dragon item. You would need the Dragon Dagger in order to make that work. However, you can, you can do something like this and get your Dragon Slayer set. And yeah, now, if you're thinking, oh shoot, I'm about to go combine stuff like Coquettish Kiss and go combine things like Lingering Kiss and whatever else, and go completely annihilate a dragon, yeah, I'm sorry, no. Okay, technically speaking, I just tested Lingering Kiss. I didn't actually test Coquettish Kiss. I guess we should do that right now. I doubt that it'll work. It seems like special moves are unaffected. Finishers are just fine with Dragon Slayer, but I don't think the other stuff is. But it is very quick to test here, courtesy of the glass pumpkins, so we'll go ahead and do that. So he's got his Dragon Scale 3 up right now. That does not help this test whatsoever. You know what? Give me just one moment. You know what? That was a surprisingly long time to double check, but I can confirm that none of the kiss moves actually get any bonus from Dragon Slayer, which is a shame because I really wanted to have a thumbnail of just like a gremlin dislocating its jaw and eating a dragon, but oh well, you can't have everything you want, I suppose. So yeah, stuff like the bow or the dagger would still end up doing a decent bit more in this case, but nowhere near on the level of a Heart Crusher, which is just going to absolutely befuckerize this thing. Anyways, that being said, yeah, so that's about that. That's a gremlin in a nutshell. Their builds are very wide. They're very... If you're creatively minded and like messing around with all this different kinds of stuff, you're going to have a real darn fun with time with this guy. Just remember, you need a lich in order to be able to actually recruit one. There are no other ways. And, yeah, the earliest I believe that you can get a lich is going to be Pirate's Graveyard as soon as that is unlocked. If you get to floor 15... Actually, not even floor 15. I think it's like floor 8 that has the first 2 liches. And then from that point on, you can just go into Farampa and just go get you a gremlin. And, yeah, it's a little bit of a pain because... Well, like let's say we take a look at this gremlin over here. Notice their movement range is longer than that of your average lich. So, yeah, they're gonna have a little bit of a hard time keeping up sometimes. But anyways, thankfully, a lot of the ones that you do run into the wild, and actually I think this one's included here, will not actually upgrade their pants. So at least they should hopefully be able to keep up. Anyways. That is about that, so y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care, thank you for stopping by on this weird gremlin on this weird flappy snake bird thing, and, yeah, I guess I'm off to go do other stuff now. So, y'all take care. Later.